What do we see? In this chair, we can directly find the entire set of defects that we discussed. It is loose. Here we can see that the front legs are loose. It has a damaged appearance and the varnish is compromised. It is already quite scratched and worn. Additionally, the upper part of the varnish has faded from the sun. White spots have appeared. It has started to slowly peel. The seat is also affected. The fabric has lost its appearance. It is quite dirty. And the foam, although it hasn't completely sagged yet, still feels old, especially around the edges. We will also be replacing that. But regarding the seat, it's the easiest part of the job. So for now, we will remove it. In these types of chairs, it comes off easily. And let's just set it aside for a bit. Now let's talk about the frames. The most challenging part of working with the chair is, of course, the frames. In order to glue it properly and securely so that it doesn't wobble, and to refresh the varnish, it is necessary to disassemble it as much as possible first. The problem with this chair is that it has already been repaired. It was repaired, and the repair, as you can see, was done using screws. Here, 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 you can see from these sides. This means that the appearance of the chair is compromised. There will also be another problem regarding how to cover these holes. Additionally, there is an issue with this type of chair. The issue is that they have these kinds of middle joints. And especially due to the looseness caused by the absence of a middle brace, the chair doesn't wobble, but during disassembly, these joints can get in the way because they often hold well in these areas while the chair itself is still wobbly and creaks. This is the difficulty of disassembly, but we will carefully and gradually try to take it apart as much as possible in order to properly glue all the loosened parts. So, to start, we will unscrew all the screws. What do we do next? After we have removed the screws, we do not start breaking anything yet. It is necessary to carefully inspect all the joints. Why? Because sometimes, even in the factory, the joints from the inside or even from the front can be secured with thin nails without heads. In order to tighten the joint so that it doesn't loosen while the glue is drying, or in case someone tried to repair it this way, and if we do not remove such small metal pins or nails, cracks will naturally occur during disassembly and the chair will only break further. Therefore, it is certainly necessary to carefully inspect all these areas. Well, it seems there is nothing like that here. So what do we do next? Perhaps we look at which planes our chair is shaking slightly. Its upper part wobbles a little. You can feel it a bit. This part holds firmly. These connections are, of course, the most problematic. Let's try to disassemble them right now. What exactly do we need for this? We will need a smooth block just like this, and a regular hammer. You can certainly use a mallet or a rubber hammer. However, the impact of a rubber hammer is often weaker than that of a metal one. However, under no circumstances should you hit the varnish with a metal hammer. Even if you plan to replace or redo it, there will be dents left in the wood that will be almost impossible to cover up. Well, let's try using a mallet first and see what happens. Here we see that this part has come out, and the middle joint has also come out, which is not bad either. With such light strikes, not strong ones, only in order to maintain the integrity of the spikes, we remove them. When the disassembly is slow, it is necessary to periodically check if there are any cracks in these parts. Here we have checked for any nails. However, there may be some brackets or something that we might have missed. And when disassembling, if it is difficult, you should periodically check for any chips starting to form. Sometimes the glue holds the outer part better than the inner one, and a chip starts to form in this area. In such cases, you can, for example, use a wide screwdriver or a wide chisel, insert it into this spot, and hit it. Do not hit here, but hit the spot that is starting to crack. However, we do not have this problem here. In the same way, we continue to carefully and meticulously take apart the entire chair. A rubber hammer can be used to entirely disassemble it again. If a stronger impact is needed, then a smooth block and a regular metal hammer can be used, although it is better to use a rubber one as it is easier. While carefully removing the legs and disconnecting some joints, make sure that no additional cracks appear. So, let's continue to disassemble it as much as possible. So, here is what we have achieved in the end. We managed to disassemble some parts. However, a few details cannot be taken apart. For example, this one, it is holding very tightly. If we try to knock it out, well, there is no need for that. It holds quite well. If you try to knock it out, you might just break the tenon or break the leg. Also, in this part, we have two pieces that remain unassembled. Why should you try to disassemble the furniture as much as possible? It is much easier to work on the disassembled parts separately to remove the old varnish. It is much more difficult to work on the joint when they are assembled like this. During the disassembly, as I mentioned, these joints are angled. A problem has arisen. One of them has cracked. But there is nothing to worry about. We will repair it and the joint will hold very well. Nevertheless, this kind of thing has happened. You can also pay attention to the joints themselves. They were once glued together with the fabric. This, by the way, is not a bad thing. This is definitely the right decision. It absolutely allows you to remove the wood if there is a large play. Just shoving in little splinters, or even more so, simply applying a thick layer of glue. This, well, it's useless. The fabric is much better. In general, most of the joints in this chair, except for the front legs, which simply have a very large lever and a heavy load on the front joints, the chair was not very wobbly compared to how many years it has been in use. So, what are we going to do next? Are we going to glue it first and then clean it? No, as we discussed. As you probably understand, it is much easier to remove the old varnish when it is disassembled. When it comes to varnishing, it is a cosmetic finish, which can be intermediate or major. But here we will do a complete overhaul. We want this chair to look as good as possible, so we will be removing the old varnish completely. So let's carefully set aside all the different parts of the ladder, ensuring that we keep everything organized. We will then proceed to work on assembling them in the correct order, step by step, to ensure everything is done properly. And let's start with the most difficult part, the one that has been the least successful to disassemble. Here we have the most joints. How are we going to remove the varnish? Just to remind you briefly, some people believe that we should use a sander, but the sander creates a lot of dust, and the sandpaper gets clogged very quickly with varnish dust. Plus, with a sander, you can't clean everything, especially the joints or places, with such bends. There are also tips for using special chemical compositions to remove varnish, but they are extremely toxic and not always effective. Additionally, this process is very time-consuming. I tried different methods in sanding and drum sanders and such, as well as heat guns for warming and removing varnish, which are also very toxic and not very effective. In general, I settled on this kind of tool. It is a sharp boot knife with which the varnish is simply scraped off. But of course, we talked about safety techniques when working with this tool. It is advisable for the supporting hand to be in a glove. Both hands can be fitted with the tightest gloves possible. Plus, in this case, when working with such a boot knife, you must absolutely not work like this, because you can inflict a very serious injury on yourself. The ideal option is to push away from yourself. But this can be difficult, and the hand gets tired quickly. And one really wants to take and lead with the supporting hand. This is very dangerous. You can again inflict a serious injury on yourself. How do we get out of this situation? Well, of course, it's best if we have a support like this. We can work on it here. File, 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 file. If we take the leg, and our hand is tired of leading it there, we want to lead it here. It is necessary to stand in such a way that we have support for our supporting hand, our torso. In this way, move your hand from the shoulder when removing varnish. Do not move like this from the elbow, as it may slip and you could cut yourself. Instead, move from the shoulder like this and you will constantly be pressing against the torso. Well, this is more of an extreme case. Generally, it's correct to remove varnish like this, with these kinds of movements. You see how quickly it can be done. In fact, it doesn't require excessive effort. The main thing is that the knife is good. Here is a good boot knife or another knife made of very good steel that will suit you. The blade should not be particularly long in overall length, nearly straight, with a very slight curve, literally less than ½ millimeter. And this is how we definitely took the part, and it absolutely works great. This is how we remove the varnish. It is done quite quickly. Cleaning such a chair usually takes from 30 minutes to an hour. For such processing, depending on how well you are prepared, but let's return to the most complicated detail. If it is somewhat more clear how to act, here we are now at the tips. First, we thoroughly and carefully clean the area itself with a sharp boot knife. On the other hand, when we probe this area, we can see how deep we have gone, and on the knife, we can sharpen the reverse side a bit, not just making it sharp, but creating a slightly straight edge. With this edge, we can clean the very edge or simply trim it with the knife. These areas can sometimes be difficult to work with. If you handle it this way, you will damage the adjacent part when using the knife. Therefore, it is necessary to tilt the knife as much as possible and start from the very corner, gradually tilting the knife and moving to the edge. When we were just cleaning here a little, we can lay a piece of thin fiberboard. Detail here, for example. In this way, we entirely remove the varnish from the entire torso using a sharp boot knife. I say again, this is literally minimally harmful to health. This does not prevent fine dust, although even such dust can still have an impact on someone. It is advisable to use a regular dust mask when doing such work. Strong chemicals, such as varnish removers, are also not used. They are very toxic and should preferably be used outdoors, especially when it is windy, and it is still advisable to wear a mask. So, a little over half an hour has passed. Using this knife for the flat parts and this homemade drum sander for the upper rounded areas, we completely cleaned the chair of old varnish in just over 30 minutes. Next, our task is to clean all the joints, that is, all the mortise tenon connections, and all the tenons, and all the mortises, or slots. How do we do this? Well, it's certainly much easier with the pins. You can use a sharp knife, you can use a fine rasp, or you can use a wooden block with some sandpaper. For example, such as, what are we doing? For example, let's take an old fabric with old traces of varnish. What are we doing? We start by carefully and slowly scraping it with a knife, gently and with precision, like this. We place it like this on the knife and clean it out like this. Now it's almost completely clean. This is the surface. In this part, we are repeating the same process as before, making sure that each step is followed precisely to ensure consistency and achieve the same results as previously. For gluing, this is, well, almost the most important operation. The better we thoroughly clean the wood from the old glue, the better the new glue will completely penetrate the wood and create the best joint possible. You can take such a routine or schedule, for example, in your daily activities, but not too much, so as not to wear down the wood significantly. On both sides, just like this. Or alternatively, you can use this kind of block. If the varnish is not very rough, there is not much of it. Well, a rasp and a knife for removing old glue and remnants of fabric from the joints. As for the ears, it's a bit more complicated, it's harder to get inside. But again, we can take a knife, we can take one like this, or we can take a thinner one. And again, Under no circumstances should we do it like this. Instead, we should place our hand and only use wrist movement like this to clean the side walls from the remnants of old glue and fabric. We can use this knife or that knife, but only with wrist movement. Not like this because it will slip and you will cut yourself. Only with a wrist movement. This is how we clean it. You can also gently take a file and, as much as the surface allows, clean it in this way. This operation must indeed be performed on all joint areas. Only then will the chair be ready for further work. So what do we do next? Next, we need to very carefully sand all these surfaces using this sanding sponge with abrasive. So it's very convenient. It is elastic and wraps around all the curves and semicircles, and it also captures any dents. In this section, we will show you the method to cut all the necessary parts. It's crucial to understand that we don't need a large amount of material for this task. By adhering to these guidelines, you can effectively manage the resources required. Such sponges are very well suited for this, and a smooth surface is achieved very quickly. Thus, we do the entire table. By the way, when we are sanding, I recommend wearing a mask because the process is quite dusty. Therefore, we will take longer this way. But before we move on, let's briefly recap what we have done. So, we disassembled the chair, avoiding damage as much as possible. We removed the old varnish from it using a sharp knife and some specialized technical devices. I want to emphasize once again that I am not against sanders, but as we mentioned at the very beginning of this course, we are focusing on those who are just starting out or who want to repair their furniture. In such cases, not everyone may have a sander. Moreover, it is not always possible to process such rounded internal areas with a sander. It is also not always possible to finish the work if the entire structure cannot be disassembled, and if the chair is whole and cannot be taken apart, then a sander will be of little help for all the internal parts of the crossbar. Therefore, the ability to use a sharp cobbler's knife for removing varnish may still come in handy for this work. In addition, we sanded everything with a sanding sponge. Don't forget to use a dust mask in such cases. We also thoroughly cleaned each and every eyelet for them and meticulously ensured they were spotless. In general, everything is ready for further work. The table needs to be glued, stained, and varnished. But what should we do first? Stain it or glue it? Strangely enough, it depends on which glue we will be using. And let's talk about two types of glue. The first is the well-known PVA glue, which, by the way, is quite suitable for gluing wood if it is of good quality. The quality of glue is determined by the absence of a sharp smell and its sufficient thickness. Plus, you can simply take it like this on your fingers, hold it for a bit, and check its adhesive ability. We will also use this glue, but we have already used a lot of it. We even had to cut the box. This is Berit glue, which is based on polyurethane. It is somewhat similar to mounting foam. Over time, when you use it several times and open it, the top part starts to harden when exposed to air. Therefore, you have to cut off the box, and a plug forms from the glue itself. What is the difference between these glues? Why will we decide whether to cover with stain or not, depending on the glue? If we are gluing with PVA glue, we will first cover with stain. Because when gluing with PVA glue, we will try to apply enough glue so that it oozes out during assembly. And PVA glue is absorbed by the wood if any drops get on it, or it will simply seep out. And where the PVA glue is absorbed, the stain will not be absorbed. Thus we will cover it with dark stain, and we will have light bold spots remaining. Therefore, if we are using PVA glue, we first cover all the parts with stain, and then apply the adhesive glue to the chair, such as this. If we use glue based on polyurethane, it retains a porous structure in the areas where it stands out, allowing the stain to be well absorbed. And right at the joint where this glue will show a little, while PVA glue remains transparent. Berit glue has a yellowish color, but it absorbs the stain and can be painted over. Therefore, if we use an adhesive material based on polyurethane, we will first glue, such as for example, and then cover with stain. In In this case, we will use this glue. Why? Well, it is basically familiar. Here is a glue. Based on polyurethane, for example, Peritpo glue. What is special about them? When some joints are sufficiently loose, this glue has the property, like mounting foam, to expand in volume and fill all gaps and other spaces. Additionally, we have old holes here. So, we will also fill these holes with this glue. As it penetrates into them, it will spread out and create additional bonding from the inside. And they can simply be used again as putty, then this area can be cut off, what comes out, and varnished. Therefore, we will use this specific type of glue, which is known for its effectiveness and reliability. This way, we can carefully remove the cork that has formed over time and can use it efficiently. Any glue should be used strictly according to the provided instructions to ensure safety and effectiveness. Regarding polyurethane glue, it is necessary to first moisten all joints. We use water and a brush for this. We will start the assembly with the rear frame. To begin with, our primary focus will be on the complete assembly of the rear frame. This process starts with the careful selection and arrangement of specific parts, including all the necessary crosspieces. We will initiate this task by focusing on the precise assembly of these joints, ensuring that each connection is secure and stable. Once the rear frame is fully assembled, our attention will shift to the front part of the structure. In this phase, it is crucial to meticulously moisten all the areas where the adhesive will be applied. This is done using a brush to ensure that the glue penetrates effectively, providing a strong bond. The process involves gently brushing the surfaces to be glued, making sure that every area is adequately prepared. After applying the moisture, we must carefully remove any film that may have formed on the surface. This step is essential to ensure that the adhesive adheres properly and that the final assembly is both durable and reliable. By following these detailed steps, we ensure that the assembly process is thorough and that the final product meets the highest standards of quality and craftsmanship. And the glue is applied in a very thin layer because it expands in volume later. We apply it in a very thin layer to the parts being glued, slightly. Therefore, its consumption is very small. It will later increase in volume and also seep out everywhere. We apply it to the internal parts as well. Of course, it is best to process the top one as it bears the greatest load. And after applying this glue, it is necessary to leave it for a few minutes so that it starts to foam. Here, for example, it is already visible. You can see that it becomes so white and starts to slightly increase a little in volume. So we have these few more minutes of time. The steel glue needs to be properly covered and protected because it does not like reacting with air in order to ensure that at this stage, it is crucial to ensure that every component is accurately and precisely placed in its designated position. This step is vital for the overall assembly process. We begin by carefully taking the top part, making sure to handle it with care to avoid any damage. Proper alignment and positioning are key to ensuring that the assembly functions correctly. Do not confuse the top and bottom. We immediately notice that there is a gap in the grooves here. The top is higher, the bottom is lower. The top is higher, the bottom is lower. Also, these spacers come in different lengths. One is longer, while the other is shorter. The top one is longer, the bottom one is shorter. Additionally, their shape also curves downwards. Thus we have all lubricated, arranged the parts in the order of gluing, and now the glue has set enough. We are now starting to insert these parts. Then, it's not frightening at all, it's even quite normal at all. We place all the necessary and required fastenings, components and parts and close them securely with a rubber mallet. Thus, the tightly fitted part began to protrude, which is normal. So here we worked on the rear part. After that, we take and attach the side. And here it will already proceed together with the front leg in this process. In the same way, we moisten all the parts. Apply glue, let them sit for a couple of minutes, and then glue them together. We glue it all together, tapping with a rubber mallet until the joints are as tight as possible. In case any joints, even with this glue, turn out to be very wobbly, meaning that when we insert them, they move a lot and do not fit tightly, then we should not rely on this glue to hold everything together. It is still worth placing a piece of fabric here. So let's continue gluing. So the joint has been fitted quite well, in a very precise manner. Additionally, we are reinforcing it and securely. We inspect all the vases. Well, we also remember that a piece flew off back then. We are also applying glue to all of this. We carefully apply glue on all sides, including the main contact area with the chair, thoroughly. Next, we carefully apply adhesive to this component and securely attach it to its designated position, ensuring it fits perfectly and holds firmly in place. This is how we carefully and meticulously glue the broken part together. We carefully glue the prepared part, ensuring that we apply glue to all connection points thoroughly, and then we very carefully insert it into its designated place, making sure everything fits perfectly. And we can ensure the security of the glued area with staples, such as using them to maintain the tightness of the connection. This is the method by which it is accomplished, ensuring precision and accuracy. And on the opposite side, following the crack, the process is executed in a similar manner, with careful attention to detail. So, as you can see, the chair is glued together in a very secure manner. Now we need at least 30-40 minutes, maybe an hour, for the glue to come out of all the holes, for it to set, so that we can remove it mechanically and continue finishing the chair. You can also tighten where necessary, as well as fill these holes with glue like putty, and ensure a secure fit by using appropriate tools and materials that are suitable for the task, and for a while. While the glue is drying, we have the opportunity to work on the seat. So what do? Well, first of all, of course, we disassemble it by removing the old fabric. It's convenient to do this with pliers, like this. It doesn't always come off easily with the staples, but then we can carefully pry it off with a knife and completely remove everything. This is how we take off the fabric from the seat. Sometimes it is necessary to remove the fabric and then also to take out the staples that remain, those that are not necessarily driven in but have sharp edges sticking out. They need to be pulled out as well to avoid injuring your hands or getting scratched. Thus, we remove the fabric from the entire seat. So this is how we remove the fabric and take out the staples that are sticking out. You need to carefully check to ensure that there are no sharp broken pieces of staples left anywhere, so as not to injure your hand. Carefully inspect, not with a sharp movement, but gently, just a little, and you can feel it immediately with your fingers. So, the foam here is actually already old. We are throwing it away. What do we do next? The fabric is original, the base is very good, it is absolutely undamaged, so it does not need to be replaced. Therefore, we can right away start working with the foam without delay. So we clean it thoroughly and carefully. And then we take the very soft cushioning foam. Cut the foam the foam must be cut along the contour of the seat. On the flat part of the foam, for a smooth cut, it is better to place a guide to ensure that the cut is as precise as possible. We make allowances for the foam, considering that it is inconvenient to unfold it in order to press it down. We do it this way, but remember that the foam has a semicircle shape, so we take a thin sharp knife and, keeping an allowance of more than a centimeter, make light movements without applying too much pressure. This method ensures precision and safety, allowing us to carefully navigate the contours of the foam. By maintaining a steady hand and a gentle touch, we avoid any potential mishaps or damage to the material. It's crucial to be patient and meticulous during this process, as rushing could lead to errors or uneven cuts. Always prioritize accuracy and control. If the knife is not sharp, pressing down hard will not make any difference. But if it is sharp, there is no need to press down hard. With such light, gentle sawing movements, we carefully cut the foam. We cut out exactly as much as we need, precisely what is necessary. Here is what we currently have at this moment. Here we have the front part, and here is the back part. So we have left quite enough extra material, but 4 centimeters on this seat will be too much. The shape of the seat is such that it already rises above the frame of the chair, and there was 2 centimeter foam. We will use the 2 centimeter one. But what to do if there is no 2 centimeter foam? That is, if there is 4 centimeter foam. There are devices for cutting foam. A 36-volt transformer is needed, tungsten wire and spring. Those who understand what I am talking about will be able to do it themselves. But for those who do not have such a device, what can be done? You can even cut this foam manually. How exactly? We will also need this thin, sharp knife, precisely. And we take it. This along the edge, visually starting to cut the foam in half. In this way, pressing here with your palm not too hard, using these sawing movements, and we go around in a circle. There is no need to rush. The main thing is absolutely safety. If the unevenness is plus or minus 1 millimeter, it is completely fine for foam. In this way, with circular movements, we gradually and carefully go deeper and deeper. From time to time, we can periodically check to ensure that the blade does not veer to one side or the other, and thus we gradually cut it to the middle. By the end, while trimming, we can use our fingers to gently check both sides to ensure we are not going down or up. Like this. We trim, and here we have 2 pieces of foam. This is excess. This will go for the second seat. Here we have a piece of foam for the seat. Centimeters. This is the extreme option. If there is no 2 centimeters available, it is needed. Usually, this is not how it is done. However, in order not to have to travel and buy a whole sheet for just 2 seats, you can cut it with this kind of knife by 4 centimeters. So, how will we attach it? We will attach it with glue. This is a special glue for foam. When it dries, it remains sufficiently elastic and does not crack over time. We take the foam and pour it slowly, carefully and gently like this at the edge. You can easily do it with such simple and effective movements to reach the center. And then, for better adhesion, we knead it like this. We knead it, 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 we knead it. First, we will lay out the foam, and on top, we will fit the seat cushion. We visually check to ensure that the excess around the edges is even, and until we achieve this, we do not press it down. and then we press it down with weight, you have the whole cushion, and we squeeze it like this. And it adheres strongly almost immediately, allowing us to continue working. Like next, to make it more comfortable to sit, we create a layer of batting. Shape the size we need, shape the size we need, shape the size we need, shape the size we need. In this case, the size can be cut directly along the seat cushion. This way we again position it along the front edge. And with the scissors, carefully touching the edge of the foam, we gently and precisely cut it off like this. We carefully trim this edge so that the foam is perfectly flush with the batting. The lining is flush with the foam. Then we fold the edges into the middle like this. Just a little bit of glue along the edge. And we smooth it out in reverse order like this. This way, I press it down immediately. Now here we go. We carefully trim the excess. And now we can move on to working with the fabric. We will take the measurements now. Partners take measurements with a flexible partner centimeter. We turn it over, and with allowances of about 2 to 3 centimeters on each side. In total, we have 55. Then we also take measurements based on the maximum size, 55 by 58. We will use a block fabric. We choose a straight edge, wristed for convenience. I carve out the tropical edge. How will we mark the measurements? With a dry marker here. A dry marker. It's hard to see, you can use a simple pencil. On the reverse side, on the flock, on the base, it draws very well. So we have a length of 55. Now we will equally flip both parts. And now we will carefully check if the shade changes depending on the angle of view. We turn one part, 180 degrees, and see what changes. This part looks a bit darker now, while this one is a bit lighter, so we turn it back. If we want the fabric to look dark in the front, we make an arrow like this, indicating that this is the pile. And so we can already begin the upholstery. Let's take a closer look at the upholstery process. What exactly are we doing? Bring the front part carefully towards you, and accordingly the seat in the same way as it was before. We check to ensure there is sufficient fabric to cover on all sides. And we start to staple.
We fold the fabric, press it against the seat, and secure it with 3 staples. Without releasing, we press the back part, turn it around, press the seat and the back part of the fabric in the same way, tucking it in and securing it with a few staples. We do the same on the sides. We tuck it in so that the foam is pressed down and secure it with a few staples without letting go. This is how we press and compress it to the other side. You can pull it a little tighter, just enough to ensure a snug fit. Again, we carefully fold the fabric over itself and securely fasten it with 2 staples. You can then flip it over and take a look at what we have accomplished. After that, we stretch the corner. Each corner is tightened as much as possible and secured with a staple. After that, we take scissors and cut the corner almost to the staple, leaving about 1 centimeter. After that, we again unfold the front part and lead from the middle to the sides. We fold carefully and meticulously. We tighten with precision and care. And this is how we proceed in a detailed manner to the edge. At the end, we take the edge like this. We take it like this, and we pull it up and to the side. And carefully and securely secure this spot. We lift it right here. We cut off the excess precisely. We do exactly the same further on. The movement starts at the center and gradually extends outwards, reaching the edge. This transition covers the entire area, from the middle to the boundary, ensuring a thorough and complete press. This is how we take the edge almost to the end, pull it up and slightly towards the corner, and we secure it. We carefully cut off the excess. We do the same, and precisely, for all the other corners to ensure a perfect fit. We cut off the excess. So, once we finish, we flip it over and inspect it to ensure there are no lumps, so that it doesn't turn out that one area is pulled tighter than another.
Here we can apply a bit more pressure. We also inspect from the inside, running our hands over the brackets. Sometimes, due to a knot or where the wood may be particularly hard, the staple is not driven in all the way. These spots can be tapped in with a hammer. But if everything is perfectly fine, here we have an upholstered seat. Slightly resilient and very nice. So, the seating is finished and comfortable. We can carefully and meticulously remove its side, and then we will be able to see what exactly we have with the glue. And the glue, as you can see, has already come out quite a bit by this time. And in the places where it has come out, it has taken on such a structure. This means that inside, in the place where it was not supposed to go out, it spread very tightly and filled all the voids. At the same time, it ensured a sufficiently high degree of adhesion. What do we do next? Next, it is necessary to carefully remove the glue with a knife mechanically and slightly sand these areas with a sanding sponge. This is how we will do it. We will proceed carefully and meticulously, ensuring that we do not cut or damage the wood in any way. Instead, our focus will be solely on removing the excess glue that has accumulated. This careful approach is crucial to maintain the integrity and appearance of the wood. Plus, we have quite well filled spots where we previously had screws and secure. Here is what we have, and we need to do the same for the entire table. So we have cleaned all the areas where we had glue, and here, where we used to have screws, there is a hole that is filled in most cases. Where the foam may not have completely formed in certain areas, you can easily make your own filler. Wood shavings, drop some PVA there and indeed actually add some stain of the same color that we will use to cover the chair. And with this mixture, we can carefully fill in any imperfections or old holes. Well, we are all set to thoroughly apply the stain. After shaking it a little, pour it very gently into a separate container. But I also recommend very carefully using gloves here, because the stain penetrates the skin much more thoroughly than the varnish, and it can't even be washed off with solvent. When applying stain, I typically prefer to immerse the item fully in the stain solution. This approach ensures that the stain is absorbed evenly across the entire surface. The process starts with selecting the right stain, taking into account the color, type, and material of the item. Once the stain is chosen, I prepare the area by placing protective coverings to avoid any accidental spills. Then, I gently submerge the item in the stain, ensuring it is completely covered. I let it soak for a period, which varies based on the desired stain intensity and the material's absorbency. During this time, I periodically check to ensure even coverage and make adjustments if needed. After soaking, I carefully remove the item, allowing excess stain to drip off. I then place it on a drying rack or a clean surface to dry. It's important to leave it undisturbed during drying to prevent smudging. This careful inspection and drying process ensures the stain sets properly, resulting in a beautifully finished product. Once dry, the item is ready for use or additional finishing touches if desired. The stain will dry when it lightens. This will be noticeable. For example, if we started with this leg and then apply it here, this leg will already become lighter. When the entire chair lightens, then you can continue working for a while. So, the stain has dried. This process takes about 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the humidity of the air, the temperature of the rooms, or if it is drying outside. After the stain has dried, it is necessary to go over it again with a sanding sponge, because when it dries, the stain slightly raises the grain on the wood and the surface becomes a bit rough. Therefore, we take the metal with a sponge, using light movements and not pressing too hard, especially on the corners, to avoid revealing the wood. With such light movements, we gently cover the entire surface. So we have finished sanding. To check the quality, you need to take off the glove and run your bare hand over the surface. Then it will be immediately clear that the surfaces have become smooth and free of roughness. Now we can proceed directly to the next step, which is varnishing. In this case, we will be varnishing with acrylic lacquer. This lacquer is water-based. Well, briefly, it is practically non-toxic, very easy to work with indoors, and dries quickly. In about 20-30 minutes, you can apply a second coat. Additionally, it is very convenient to work with. For 5 to 10 minutes, you can smooth out any drips without worrying. Therefore, we shake it up and we'll use it just like we discussed, using a nylon brush. Keeping it in a jar of water like this ensures that the lacquer, which is water-based, does not dry out. And our brush is soft, like new. And again, in order, following the principle of staining, but this time with a brush, not a sponge. Working with a brush and acrylic lacquer is much better. And we choose the sequence of what we will start covering and begin to work. For example, we can start with the front legs. Don't be afraid of the water-based lacquer. It initially gives a completely purple tint, but when it dries, it becomes absolutely and completely transparent. It is advisable to carefully apply the coating in order and systematically as well. We have covered one leg, and we can move on to the next. Further details. You shouldn't take too much lacquer on the brush. It doesn't drip down. So we keep an eye on the drips and monitor them closely, carefully spreading them out to ensure they are evenly distributed. I want to emphasize once again that this lacquer, these water-based lacquers, are very easy and convenient to work with. Even with a regular brush, not a sprayer, they practically leave no drips if you are careful. They do not dry as quickly as some nitro lacquers, which means you don't have time to spread it if you are working with drips using a brush. But at the same time, they do not take as long to dry as other lacquers, which require waiting a day before applying a second coat. This is how we carefully cover the entire chair. This is also a reminder. For example, here we have the leg in this cross-section. We cover it in this way. Here we have the joint. Starting from the joint, we are already doing it like this. We have done it from the joint. If you slightly touch the vertical surface, we can even it out a bit with a brush like this. And in this way, we continue to cover the entire chair with lacquer. So, we have applied lacquer to the chair for the first time. This is just the first coat, but you can already see how the appearance has transformed. There is already a shine, despite the fact that this lacquer is matte. Overall, it has also acquired a more noble appearance. What I would like to say regarding varnishing is that the most challenging areas are, of course, these joints. And here, especially, when working with water-based varnish, you can't really play around much. And it's generally the same with other varnishes. At first, when making the joints, you can apply with a brush deep into the area, regardless of the direction of the wood grain. You coat the joints thoroughly, and when they are filled with varnish, then you start spreading it along the grain, across the surface of the wood. This will make it easier for you. First, you fill the joints that are hard to reach with a brush, and then with these kinds of movements, you press the brush here and spread it out. You press the brush and moved it down. The inner part can be done in the same way. With such movements, even difficult areas can be managed. So, after covering the chair with varnish, we leave it to dry. According to the instructions, intermediate sanding can be done after 2 hours. At a certain temperature, well, basically, this varnish is such that literally 5 to 10 minutes have passed since I coated this surface, and it is already not smudging. But let's wait a little longer for it to become as dry as possible. After that, we take the sponge again and sand it once more. Because the first layer of varnish also raises the wood grain a little, the surface becomes somewhat rough again. And again, we use this fine grit sponge for sanding to go over the entire surface. But for now, we will let it dry well enough. Then we will sand it and apply varnish a second time. After that, we will meet again. And so, after allowing enough time for the varnish to dry completely, ensuring that it is no longer tacky to the touch, we proceed to sand it again with a fine sponge abrasive. This abrasive is specifically designed for delicate surfaces, providing a smooth finish. This step, along with the previous sanding, must be meticulously done before the final varnish coating is applied. We then carefully wipe the table with a soft, clean cloth to remove any dust particles, ensuring that it does not create additional roughness on the surface. After thoroughly wiping everything with a dense, lint-free cloth, which is essential to prevent any fibers from sticking, we apply the varnish once more, ensuring an even and flawless finish. Don't be scared that I'm working with him without a mask. Let me remind you that this varnish is completely non-toxic. It is water-based, and it doesn't even have a smell. And in the same way, we completely cover this table with a second layer of varnish. So, we applied the varnish a second time and let it dry lightly. And if everything is in order, then we take the seat and place it properly on our chair. Look at the beauty we have achieved. Well, let's compare it with its twin brother, which we showed together at the very beginning of this series. So, here we have two tables, here we have two tables, here we have two tables. However, the training for major repairs of upholstered furniture would not be complete if this work did not have its secrets and opportunities to improve even the factory design. We talked about the fact that the main weakness of these chairs is the front legs. This is because the lever is large, while the joint is quite short. Therefore, in this plane, such chairs quickly become wobbly. What can be done? Let's see how we can improve this design a bit. For this task, we will specifically need exactly this kind of plywood. Plywood with a sufficient thickness of 6 mm. And from this plywood we will make almost completely hidden braces in these places, which will solve the problem of the leg becoming loose. What do we do first? First we naturally take measurements. The height of this brace is 7.5 centimeters plus the distance that will go in here, which is approximately another 2 centimeters. So the total height will be 9.5 centimeters. We will have a height of 5.5 centimeters, and we mark this. Height. Next, we need to check this distance. It will be easier. We will not let the plywood go all the way to the edge so that it is not visible from the end. We will set back about 5-7 mm from the edge. And here again, without reaching the middle, we can leave 18 centimeters. That will be enough. We will end up with such a brace. There will be adequate body area in the plywood to support this load. We emphasize very important safety techniques while working with the jigsaw. Useful. Glasses are essential here. So we cut out this part to start with. How will it be positioned? It will be positioned like this, but here we have an obstruction from the fastening. So we will make an additional cut here. So we also mark the cut that we will have. We fit it, and here's what we have. As you can see, it turns out to be a nice little brace that, from the outside, if viewed from above, is how we would usually look at the chair. Right now, of course, it's on the workbench, but from above, we will be looking at it approximately like this. If desired, you can also add a slight rounding here to make it even less visible. We have the parts ready. The thickness here is sufficient. 6 to 7 millimeters of plywood will be enough because the load will be tensile. So a distance of 2.5 to 3 km is quite adequate. So what steps should we take next in our project? The next important phase is sanding the surface, which is crucial for preparing the material for subsequent stages. I will demonstrate how to sand by hand, as this method doesn't require specialized equipment like a drum sander, which you might not have. Hand sanding offers more control and precision, ensuring a smooth surface ready for further treatment. We will discuss the types of sandpaper to use, effective sanding techniques, and how to achieve the best results. This practical approach is accessible to anyone working on similar projects, making it a valuable skill to learn. I have it, but nevertheless, I am showing for such a wide audience that it takes very little time to do this by hand. Also, During sanding, it is essential to try to round off this edge as much as possible, so that it tapers off very smoothly. Well, it is necessary, of course, to do it better not by hand, as it will take too long, either not with a file, but with a rasp, in order to sharpen this edge. So, we made one part, and we will make exactly the same one. But before we do that, we also need to very carefully drill 3 holes through which we will attach this part with screws. So, we do the same on this side. Before we proceed to cut the parts, we carefully drill holes to the precise diameter required. This ensures that the screws can pass through them freely without any obstruction or resistance. Additionally, we use a larger drill bit specifically for the countersink process. This is important because it allows the head of the screw to be hidden, providing a smooth and flush surface. The hidden screw head not only enhances the aesthetic appeal, but also prevents any potential snagging or catching on the surface. What do we do after that? Well, first we will try them out on the old, yet to be repaired table and see how they behave. Here is one that we have already attached. When you start assembling them, it sometimes happens that you notice a gap remaining here. Don't be scared. First we attach it to the leg, where we have the greatest contact area of the plywood on the surface. We must check the screws to ensure they do not protrude on the length. This is how it should be done. And we screw it on. We adjust so that the plywood is not higher than the attachment of the seat. This way, we have a gap here, but we are working with plywood. Plywood is a flexible material, so it is not necessary to add anything underneath. As you can see, we have attached 2 screws here. The plywood has bent slightly, but it will not break because of that. And since we are making the chair the same on both sides, we do not deform it, and it will hold firmly. Again, we choose screws so that they do not go all the way through. Here we have a screw that literally protrudes by 2 millimeters, made of durable stainless steel, which is known for its resistance to rust and corrosion. The plywood, which is 6 millimeters thick, is slightly angled due to the way it was cut, which is crucial for the overall design and stability of the structure. So, we have such a screw that fits perfectly into this setup. We made these little pieces together, carefully aligning each one to ensure they fit seamlessly, using a precise method that involves measuring, cutting, and assembling with great attention to detail. In this position, they are visible. But when you place the chair on the floor, like this, they will be practically invisible. Plus, they will be painted and stained completely in the color of the chair, just like you did with this chair. So, what have we achieved with this? We no longer have that play. It's the legs themselves that are bending, which is not a big deal. But these joints, after we properly glue them and also add these additional parts, will be much stronger than what came from the factory. So it remains to cover them with stain, varnish them, and attach them to the already prepared table. After applying stain and varnish, we ended up with 2 pieces like this. These are the details with which we will make the final touch in the repair of this chair. We carefully take the self-tapping screws, which have been meticulously selected for the appropriate length, ensuring they are perfectly suited for the task at hand. With precision and care, we will securely fasten the various parts that will ultimately make our front legs. Not only reliable and steadfast, but also exceptionally strong and durable, providing the necessary support and stability. So we have securely installed the additional fasteners and can be sure that our legs are safely no longer in this position at these joints. Now we put the seat back. Well, now let's examine in great detail our chairs from a more familiar viewpoint for chairs and dimensions. I wish success to everyone who wants to work diligently with their own hands.